4. I was about 6 or 7 when we took a family holiday to Disneyland in Florida. I was a fairly aloof child, and stranger danger was something that had been drilled into us at school. My mom was paranoid about us going off with strangers and was convinced that I was a target, being a blue-eyed blonde kid. All I wanted was my freedom to run around. Nope. From day one, I had a Velcro strap put around my waist with a stretchy cable linking me to my mother, who wore the other end on her wrist. I was effectively on a lead. A week at Disney on a lead was hell for me, and probably for my parents too. Nowadays, you would call it ADD. Back then, it was called being naughty. If I wasn't trying to undo my strap, I was barking and howling like a dog and rolling around on the floor. I was a real joy of a child. Last day there, I had calmed down quite a bit. Well, I was speaking like a human again rather than being a dog. I begged and begged for my parents to let me off the lead, until finally they gave in and said yes, I could take the strap off, but I had to hold their hands. It was a fair deal. All went swimmingly to begin with. I stayed close to my parents and held their hands. As time went by, it became clear that I wasn't going to run off. I was allowed moments of freedom, no hands. There was so many exciting things to see. All my favorite Disney characters waving, my favorite music playing. We began to cross an open area, which I think was generally towards the exit of the park. I was still hands-free, my attention firmly fixed on the Minnie Mouse who was ahead of me. When my dad grabbed my hand, I stuck to the rules. The deal was I had to hold my parents' hands, so off we went towards the exit to leave, when my dad started running. I began to run too. I wasn't sure why we were running, but I was a hyperactive child, so in my head, I was like, yay, running. And then I heard my mom scream, and I mean scream. I looked over my shoulder to see my mom, brother, and to my surprise, my dad chasing after me. I felt the hand that was holding mine tighten, and I looked up and saw the man that I thought was my dad. He was a mid-50s man with gray hair and a gray beard. Not my 40-year-old dad with black hair and no beard. This creepy fuck never looked at me once. His face was blank, and he looked pretty calm. My little feet brakes came on, out of shock, and I became lead weight, which along with the people who stopped around us due to my mother screaming, was enough for my sprinting family to catch up with me. The would-be child abductor decided that he didn't fancy his chances against my dad, dropped my hand, and disappeared. My dad chased him, and my mom and brother grabbed me. I can't remember much of what happened afterwards. Dad was built for comfort, not speed, so he didn't catch the guy. Mom was hysterical. I was gutted because this meant I was never going to be let off that lead again. I think my parents saw the police out there, and they said there was a number of attempted abductions around that time at the Disney park. Number 3. Growing up, I always wanted to go on a bike ride at night. Something about it seemed really cool to me. It wasn't till I was about 13 that my mom finally let me. She told me to wear my helmet, have my phone, and take a flashlight. She set the parameters for where I was allowed to go. She gave me about 4 miles, which was a lot to me, so right after sunset, I was off. I loved it. There were no people walking their dogs, no kids running around. The temperature was perfect, etc. It was really fun, so fun that I ignored the limits my mom had set. You see, where I was biking was all walking paths. It was one of those grassy areas in between 2 neighborhoods. There's this long path that went at least 600 feet at a 25-degree angle, and I was flying down this hill, having an absolute blast, and darted right through the parameters. My mom set these limits for a reason. Everything on the inside was close to houses and people. The outside, more specifically, the place where the path I was on led to, was barren. I rode along this path for about 10 minutes before I could only see some of the lights of the houses on the inside of the city limits. After 15 minutes of riding along this dirt path, I hear singing. It sounded about 30 to 40 feet in front of me. I stopped riding to hear it better. It was a woman's voice. She was singing Eleanor Rigby by the Beatles. But she wasn't singing the words, just the melody of the vocals. Her voice was strange. You know how when you have phlegm in your throat, your voice gets all scratchy? That's what her voice sounded like. I inch forward to try and see her. I get close enough to see the silhouette of her bouncing up and down, like she was headbanging. I decide to get my flashlight out. I'm thinking that this person is in need of help or something, or maybe it's just an insane person and the light will scare them away. So I take the flashlight out of my pocket, point it at her, and turn it on. The moment the light hit her, she stopped moving completely. She was facing away from me. She had disgusting hair that seemed to be sticking together in clumps. Some of her hair was ripped off too. She was wearing a very oversized, bright red hoodie. I was almost too scared to move. I think she was too. I conjured up as much bravery as I could and said, "Sorry," in a very "oops, this is the wrong room" kind of way. She didn't respond. I turn off the flashlight and put it back in my pocket. Just as I was turning my bike around, she screams. She screams in a awful, awful high-pitched voice. I damn near shit myself as I throw myself back onto my bike. I hear her voice getting closer to me. I book it as fast as I can. I don't look behind me. I don't stop pedaling. Her screaming grew quieter and quieter until it dissolved into the howling of the wind. Number 2. My great-grandmother was born in 1913 in Ukraine. In 1932, when she was only 19 years old, something called Holodomor took place. Extermination by hunger. This was recognized years later as genocide on Ukrainian people by the Soviet Union. Millions died, and as you might expect during a famine, cannibalism became rampant. It wasn't unheard of for families to kill their youngest child in order to eat. As time passed and the famine ended, things got a little better, but food was still scarce. It cost a lot just for the basics: milk, eggs, bread, etc. It also took a lot of time, as these things weren't easy to find. Great-grandma was certain that people were still resorting to easier and more sinister methods to obtain food. My great-grandmother was pregnant with my grandfather in 1936, and she wanted fresh vegetables desperately. Sort of a pregnancy craving, you could say. So she went trekking up and down the streets, and it looked like she wasn't going to have any luck until, "Lady, you need something?" It was a small boy, about 8 years old. His cheeks were unusually full. Most people in those days had cheekbones that looked like they could poke out from your face at any slight pressure. My great-grandmother told the boy that she wanted vegetables, and his chubby face split into a grin, and gave her directions to a hovel a few blocks down. She was weary, but determined, so off she went. The hovel smelt like slaughter. She didn't think anything of it. Maybe these people had a lot of food, and she had struck a gold mine. Perhaps they would take sympathy on a pregnant woman and not charge her an astronomical price for a droopy carrot. When she pushed back the curtain that was acting as the door and said hello, 3 things happened simultaneously. There was a man with a plank of wood raised above his head, coming towards her. She caught sight of a human head laying on the table, causing her to scream, and the woman in the corner shouted, "Stop!" The woman examined my grandmother, frowning at her stomach. The boy knows that we have standards. We don't kill pregnant women. Leave. Do not repeat what you saw. We can change our minds. Great-grandmother did not need to be told twice. She left and came to America years later to start a cannibal-free life. I still wonder what would have happened if they had not noticed that she was pregnant. Number 1. So this happened when I was younger, quite a while ago. It's one of the creepiest things that has ever happened to me, and I thought all of you would like to hear it. Anyway, I was probably about 12 or 13, and my mom dropped me and my younger brother off at this little carnival thing in the supermarket parking lot. I don't know if they really do stuff like that anymore, but they used to set up a smaller carnival with maybe 10 rides and a couple of food vendors. We had been there for maybe an hour, and I noticed that this guy had been watching us for a while. I then realized he was sort of following us around to the different rides. I figured he was one of the workers, since he was wearing a carnival hat and his clothes were pretty much the same colors as the other people working there. I would look around and spot him watching us from a couple of rides over, standing next to one of the food stands. Now, I don't want to be an asshole, but this guy had the creepiest face. One of his eyes looked like it had been swallowed up by his huge swollen eyelid. He had these chapped lips that looked like they were bleeding in places. And he just kept following us around for like 30 minutes, mumbling to himself and staring. After a while, I decided that we should leave and find a way to call my mom. As we were about to leave the carnival area, literally about to walk through the exit, this guy hollers to both of us and grabs my brother's shoulder to pull him back in. He starts telling us that we're too young to be there alone and starts asking us where our parents are. I mean, I was young, but there were tons of kids there even younger than I was, without their parents. He pulled us off to a side area between 2 rides and pushed us behind him, then just stood guard in front of us. I kept asking to use a phone to call my mom, since I was still hoping that this was actually about us being too young to be there by ourselves. Finally, he gives me this phone that obviously has no SIM card in it, because it just displayed that error message that old phones used to have. I kept begging him to let us go, and he just kept muttering,
"No, we're gonna take you somewhere safe. Real safe."
He then starts laughing and saying that he's going to have to take us himself since there's no one else to take us. Finally, we see another worker walking by, and I yell out for her if I could use her phone. The guy immediately freezes up and then just starts walking away like nothing happened. I explain to the woman what happened, and she looks at me really confused and kind of worried. I didn't find out until a couple of years later, but I guess she told my mom that she didn't think the guy even worked there and that she had never seen him before in her time working. Hey guys, Unit 522 here, and I want to thank you very much for watching my video. I would appreciate it very much if you would share, like, and comment. And if you're new to this channel, become one with the Unity by hitting the subscribe button. If you have a scary story or experience that you want featured on this channel, you can always send it to my email or post it on the Free Horror Stories subreddit. The links for those can be found in the description below. If you would like to help out this channel even more, consider a PayPal donation. And for more updates, be sure to follow me on Twitter. There's nothing wrong with a little darkness in your life, as long as you never forget there's always a reason to be afraid.